Yes, indeed. And I would love to invite you to stay on because I am actually going to tell you about a masked video that has been racking up thousands of views in the last couple of days. Just got tweeted by the founder of Wired magazine, Jane Metcalf, and is going around virally in Harvard Medical School. And is something that I would love for you all to share in your efforts to help more people who haven't yet understood the absolute need for masking to get on board with that, because some of us are not so fortunate to be living in the regions that we are, and it's really quite difficult for the people who are in areas where the political leadership or the polarized population are actually still seeing masking as a political issue rather than as one of community health. And I would love to share with you a little bit about what's going on there. If you have a moment, I'll just, this is a very short 4-minute video that perhaps I could just play for you. It's highly visual. And the great thing about it is that once you've seen it, I've made available online an interactive media simulation that you can go and play with yourself just by going to the link. And you can use that to explain to your communities around the world what is going on, why we want to do that, and what the overall importance is to a community and not just to ourselves. So I will just do a quick share screen here so that we can get a quick look at how this works. And I'll give you the links for this soon. It's actually very easy. It's my name, dek.ai. I am, just for background, I'm an AI professor. If you know things like Google Translate or Microsoft Translate or Yahoo Translate and so on, I pioneered those, built a lot of the core machine learning foundations and launched the first one. But I've also been tremendously active in social activism and in AI ethics and society. So some of you might have seen Google building their AI ethics council last year. Interesting story. So I was one of the 8 that Google appointed for that. And this is really coming out of the social impact responsibility side, this video that I'll show. Oh, there's a waiting room. I see. I think I have to let people in. Okay. So let me just grab this link. Can you see this share screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yes.
Awesome. And if I just open that in a new tab, I guess that should work. Yes. And just to make sure, let me know if you can hear the sound on the video. I think it should work.
In light of global lockdowns, exponential death rates, and a global recession, it's clear that measures need to be taken to curb the spread of COVID-19. Using sophisticated computational models, we've found that if the majority of people mask up by about day 50 of the outbreak, we can greatly curb the spread of the virus. If we wait much longer, though, this opportunity will disappear. As of late April, day 50 for much of Europe and the Americas is immediate, within the next few weeks. If at least 80 or 90% of the population wears masks by then, we'll not only be able to flatten the curve, we'll be able to significantly reduce the spread of the virus and return to life as normal sooner rather than later. To show how this works, we've developed an interactive computational model that anybody can use. Here's how it works. These lines represent how the disease may spread if no interventions are made. Blue is for healthy people who are susceptible to catching the virus. Orange is for people who have been exposed. Red is for people who are infected and infectious. And green is for people who've already recovered or passed away. By day 100 after the outbreak, a lot of the population has gone from susceptible to either infected, exposed, or recovered. And by the end of the timeline, most people have not only been infected and exposed, they've also recovered or passed away. These dots represent different people. In this run, there are 200 people. To begin with, 198 are healthy and 2 are infected. Now let's look at some parameters. The mass transmission rate is how effective your mask is at preventing droplets from your nose and mouth from reaching others. The mask absorption rate is how likely drops from the outside are to make it through your mask. While N95 masks are at least 95% effective, depending on the material, homemade masks are between 68 and 85% effective. Now, let's press play. As you can see, when an infected red dot hits a susceptible blue dot, it becomes orange or exposed, and then red or infected. This is reflected in the graph. The advantage of this kind of model is that it shows you how much variance there is in what can possibly happen. Each time you run it, even with the same parameters, it'll be a little different. This is to account for random behavior. Maybe someone shakes hands with an infected person, for example, and then goes home to unknowingly infect their family, and maybe they don't. If you run the model many times, however, you'll find that it tends to average out. Now let's see what happens if the population starts wearing masks. Look at what happens to the curves. Even when the masks are only 70% effective, it's enough to significantly reduce the spread of the virus. This is super important as it buys time for the hospitals. The peak of the red curve is much lower, meaning hospitals will not be overloaded. It also helps buy time to develop treatments and vaccines. Let's try something else. This time, the population begins by not wearing masks. On day 50, though, 90% of people start wearing them. Now see what happens. Although more and more people were initially exposed, as soon as 90% of people mask up, the spread stops and starts to level out. This means that even if people only start wearing masks at day 50, it's not too late to significantly reduce the spread of the virus. Now let's see what happens if only half the population mask up at day 50. This might happen if mask wearing is only recommended and not enforced. As you can see, the virus is not nearly as well contained. Having just 50% of people wearing masks is not enough to prevent the virus from spreading at a high rate. Finally, let's see what happens if people don't start masking up until day 75. As you can see, at this point, it's too late to stop the rapid spread of the virus. This is why we recommend that by day 50, at least 80 or 90% of the population wear masks. Even if they're homemade, this model shows that it can still make a real difference. Once again, as of late April, day 50 for much of Europe and the Americas is immediate, within the next few weeks. It's therefore important that people start masking up as soon as possible. Remember, by wearing a mask, you're not just protecting yourself, you're also protecting those around you.
So this was something that grew out. Thank you, Jess. This was something that grew out of. Oh, let me stop, Trevor Noah. That grew out from a project that I've been working on collaboratively with people in 4 other countries. We have a doctor who is at the forefront in London at the Royal Free Hospital, at the forefront of the fight, leading fight against coronavirus there. A well-known writer in Paris, in Finland, someone who is linked to the ministry in Estonia and Cambridge. And we've been looking at how to convince people about the need for 80–90% of the population wearing masks when there's so much unconscious cognitive bias in many cultures that stigmatizes that instead of creating an aspiration to take care of your community. And that ties into a lot of my work that I'll tell you about on polarization and misinformation, disinformation, as well as the way we're looking at using AI to tackle the kinds of unconscious biases that unfortunately today, as an unintended consequence of AI-driven social media and search, is actually being used to take advantage of those unconscious biases for profit and creating an unhealthy dynamic of polarization at the same time. And so this has grown out of lots of that sort of work. On that same page, which you can easily get to just from typing dek.ai into your browser. I'll type it into the chat in a moment. You can also go and try the simulator yourself. So if you click on this thing, I'll just go ahead and do it for kicks. this thing comes up, and it is already running. You can rewatch that tutorial if you want to, but it's already kicking in. And let me just show how the thing is running. You have every run is randomized, so it's going to produce different results each time. Over time, if you do many runs, it'll average out to these faint lines that are the standard epidemiological model. And then you can play yourself. Like you can say, oh, I'm going to put masks on 50% of the people by clicking that slider. I'm going to like raise it to 90%. So it's a very simple way of playing with the timing of what happens if I get 90% of the people to mask up at day 160. And of course, it's too late to do very much by then. And you can play with this yourself. You can click on advanced if you want to play with those parameters. You can actually say, hey, you're being overly conservative when you say that wearing a mask only stops 70% of your viruses from getting through to other people. That's actually a lot higher. 70% is typically how much the mask stops what comes in from others to you. But you could say, let's be more realistic. Let's crank that up more like if you wear a mask, it stops 95% of your pathogens from getting to other people. You can change other parameters. You can control the masking rates with finer tune timing than the simple slider over here. You can say people are going to start masking and they're going to gradually ramp up at a rate of 10% a day, and all sorts of fun stuff like that. And this is actually all documented in papers that you can look at. There's a research paper that is is on arXiv, which is full of the scientific stuff. In order to try to get people outside of the ivory tower sphere and so forth, we also put together a glossy version of the white paper that has like pictures, and we're actually actively looking for more pictures because they have to be high quality and license free. And we had a friend in Finland who's a model who started a mask making company, and she gave us these shots, but we need more diversity. So like if any of you have access to aspirational photos, right? We don't want photos of people that look like wearing a mask is such drudgery and it ruins my life. What we want is something that shows people, hey, masks are fashionable. Hey, mask wearing is fun and it makes me look like a positive citizen. That sort of image is what we're going for. So we've started receiving a few contributions, but we love if you have more and we can make a mosaic for the next edition of this report. Why are we doing all this kind of stuff? And I'm going to stop talking in a moment because I want this to be more of a conversation. The reason is because of the work that, when I started working in AI, I did one of the first PhD theses at Berkeley to argue for machine learning approaches to AI decades ago. And immediately turned around and applied it to build machines that could translate and putting it publicly on the web. And this is way back in the 1990s. And it's because I had gotten recruited from Berkeley as one of several hundred founding professors for the University of Science and Technology here in Hong Kong, HKUST, whose background you see virtually here. Beautiful campus, come and visit. And it really is sort of a thing where if you float around the world, you see how cultures are failing to connect. And I thought, oh, if we can make machines that will help us to connect better and overcome the cultural biases that prevent people from being able to relate to each other, that would be a wonderful thing to do. Fast forward, 2016, as an American, overseas American, although I'm often in Berkeley every month, we're having this problem that AIs have exponentially been amplifying the worst unintended consequences from the unconscious cognitive biases that evolution has built into us, things like confirmation biases. And we've been studying that in the AI ethics course that I'm teaching at the university this semester. The amount of misinformation and disinformation on the whole COVID episode has been crazy, right? We started with these notions that mask wearers are sick and contagious, and that masks are not necessary. Don't wear masks unless you're medical staff, or that you have to have N95 masks or it's not even worth it, or that the coronavirus is going to remain an Asian problem, so the rest of us in the world don't need to worry about it, or that it's an escaped Chinese bioweapon, or that it's an escaped American bioweapon, or you know, it's the Chinese virus was a popular meme in the US and some places, or that Chinese eat bats. And so, you know, this has been really fertile ground to look at the whole space of misinformation, of fake news and stuff that I got into in 2016 as an American when the whole Cambridge Analytica episode started happening. And that's an episode that I have actually close personal connections to people who were involved with and tried to warn about, unfortunately unsuccessfully. These sorts of things are making it very difficult, both domestically within the US and other countries, as well as geopolitically, internationally, for humanity to get together and tackle problems that are systemic, that are system-wide, like climate change and like pandemics, where all of humanity is in the same boat. And as long as everybody is trying to grab, you know, their own side of the boat, but not like all bailing the same boat out so that it doesn't sink, we are going to literally be in deep water. And so we've been working on looking at ways to apply the machine learning, natural language processing, computational linguistics, and cognitive science to going beyond the problem of translating between, you know, cultural translation, but not between, say, Chinese and English or Arabic and Spanish, but more looking at the problems we have even domestically within the same language group. So like translating between what a coastal Californian or like me, the kind of English I speak versus my family in Kansas City. Because the kinds of metaphors people use, the kinds of stories and narratives that people use to talk about these things ends up playing to those unconscious biases, and AI tends to make those things go viral and create echo chambers, to create silos and filter bubbles. And so you end up with, you know, things that for profit search engines and Twitter and Facebook and all the rest of it, they push things at us that we are likely to click, because that's how they make money from the advertisers. And what are we likely to click? Well, it's things that confirm our previous beliefs. It's things like the defense attribution bias, where humans tend unconsciously to blame somebody else more and more as the outcome becomes more severe. They tend to feed our present bias, which focuses us on immediate payoffs instead of thinking about future trade-offs. Hostile attribution biases that make us unconsciously interpret others' behavior as having hostile intent, or backfire effects that feeds our unconscious desire to double down when we're presented with counter evidence to something we believe. We actually unconsciously double down and strengthen our incorrect beliefs even more. And so there's tons of these effects. The illusory truth effect is basically what Colbert called truthiness. Something that, you know, like sounds, it's false, but it's easier to process, and we think, oh yeah, of course it's true. Like, remember this one? Sip a hot drink every 15 minutes to wash the virus down and let stomach acids kill it, right? Or what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So like, let's build herd immunity all at once. Things like this. And so this project with the video that I showed you came out of a desire to find new languages to talk about this that were not politically identifiable. And part of that is things like, shifting the framing. It's so that masks, the discussion about masks is not about how do I protect myself, but rather how do I protect my community? And also shifting to more concrete languages, visual languages like the ones that the video was taking care of, so that like you can actually see tangibly what's going on, and it's not using some sort of political metaphor at all, and you can play with it yourself so that you can actually see. I don't want to like monopolize the conversation here. It would be great to have a conversation if any of you would like to chime in. I'll maybe unshare the screen so we can see each other better.
Hi, Dakai. That was great.
Hi, Karen. Thank you.
Hi. I wanted to kind of, I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but I wanted to kind of ask you because, so I'm in Scotland at the moment, and our political leader has actually gone against the advice of the UK government and said to wear face coverings. But I'm interested to kind of, you spoke about 70% effectivity of the masks, and I was trying to, where does that land in terms of having it to be a mask or be a face covering? Like, where would the scale be in terms of how effective might a scarf be over a face mask? Or is there any kind of documentation around that in terms of what would be most effective? Like, I'm guessing those medical masks are the most effective ones, but given that we don't want to take away from the health resources, what's is a scarf going to do enough, basically?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons why it's an excellent question, why we're emphasizing in the video and for you to play with, the difference between absorption and transmission is because the discussion has been so focused on absorption, protecting myself. And it's true that, like a homemade mask isn't going to be as effective as an N95 mask for that purpose. But most of us, we're not doctors, and we're not facing these patients all the time. And what is more important than that is actually this concept that you can protect other people. And there was this great meme that went around that I wish I could show you. I probably can. I'm just going to hack this. I'm not going to say it because it's a little bit not entirely safe for work, but it's kind of funny. So somebody forwarded this to me, and let's see if we can read this. Oh, geez, it keeps on going in and out.
Really? Oh, yeah, I saw a meme for that too. Yeah. I liked it.
Can you see it? Should I just read it?
Yeah, it might be easier because it's fading in from the amazing background you have.
It says, do face masks make sense? Let's explain it for dummies. If we all run around naked and somebody pees on you, you get wet right away. If you are wearing pants, some pee will get through, but not as much, so you're better protected. Okay, so that's your homemade mask. But if the guy who pees is also wearing pants, then the pee stays with him and you do not get wet. So that's the point of wearing masks, is and because of that, wearing a mask is likely to be actually way more effective than stopping 70% of my particles from getting through to other people, just like wearing pants. Right, and so if I put on a mask, I am really protecting those people around me. And it can be like, this is just a cheap surgical mask. You can easily make homemade masks without sewing machines in 15 minutes or less, even unskilled like me. They're from very good directions in YouTube videos. And those will be more than enough, using the simulation that we were just watching, to cut down massively on the propagation of the virus and then slow things down the way that we saw in the video. And that's how Hong Kong tackled it, right? I mean, Hong Kong, we've just had, I think, the 6th day in a row of 0 new cases. The virus never went exponential here because everybody took those warnings seriously and started masking up in January. And these are lessons that for me, it's been very painful to watch, why is my home country in the US and my family and friends in Europe and elsewhere, why haven't they done this? And we've seen the catastrophe where the infection rates and mortality rates have been so needlessly higher. I think that there's been, again, due to unconscious biases that I was talking about with things like, defensive attribution biases and backfire effects, where people have been saying, oh, it's because the WHO didn't warn us. It's because travelers kept on coming from China or Asia. And they're sort of neglecting the fact that we in Hong Kong had more travelers from mainland China and then by far than the US or Europe or anybody else. And we could still handle it. And we got the same warnings from WHO that everybody else got, and we paid attention and everybody else didn't. So blaming the WHO doesn't make any sense to me. But this is the sort of thing where it's hard to combat the cultural unconscious biases frontally, because if you explain those things frontally, then the backfire effect kicks in and people double down. So to sort of try to get through and get cultures to learn, the best practices and lessons from other cultures that they don't relate to requires a more pragmatic, roundabout way of thinking about how we do the cultural translation, which the video and things are a part of doing.
Hey, I just want to chime in too, Takai. Thank you so much. You really know your stuff. I was super impressed. And I made a joke to myself, thinking I wish Trump and Boris were watching this. I mean, it's amazing how something as simple as this, like the meme explained it quite simply and humorously, but why was this so politicized? Why is it so stigmatized? I mean, even now, you have Trump who won't wear it. You have Pence, the vice president of the US, going to Mayo Clinic, breaking the hospital's policy by not wearing a mask. And it's this whole concept of leading by example. There seems to be a stigma, and it's being perpetuated by leaders, that it's not cool or showing weak. It's a sign of weakness, I think, in their eyes, to wear a mask. And I feel there's so many. Yeah. So, I mean, the only comment I was going to make about that was partially an observation, but partially I'm disappointed in the sense that this isn't brain surgery, and why is something obvious not already anticipated baked into the plans? Why wasn't Dr. Fauci and all the epidemiologists from the very beginning just saying wear it, as opposed to maybe you could, maybe you shouldn't?
There's it is sort of to a lot of us mind-boggling, and at the same time, I think the understanding of these unconscious biases is the only way to really figure out how to start tackling the problems, because there's a very strong tendency in my coastal American communities in California and New York to just vent about this in outrage and say, God, how can these people be so stupid or whatever? But that doesn't actually fix anything, because of all the unconscious bias, it hardens the lines. And so once we get through venting privately to each other, it's sort of okay, how do we transcend sort of those barriers? Because otherwise we're just going to contribute even more to the siloing of these problems. And this is something at a bigger scale, I think, is a fundamental challenge in the era of AI powered social media and search. It's a central challenge to whether democracy is workable, right? Because if you have AIs pumping tremendously polarizing information, both misinformation and partial information to the population in a way that shuts people down in a way that they can't speak to each other anymore, then you end up with the kinds of election results that we have, and it will tear us apart if we can't figure out how to rise to that challenge. So when you have someone like Trump egging on the protesters who are, who have co-opted the women's reproductive choice slogan in the US, my body, my choice, for like, don't tell me to wear a mask, it's like, things are sort of going a bit off of the rails. And when you have Bojo in the UK, like determinedly shaking hands until he has to go into the critical emergency ward for having gotten infected. It does sort of, and they, and they still have massive popular support rates that once we get over shaking our heads, we have to think, well, how do we get over that? How do we find a way that sort of thing doesn't happen? And I think, at the bottom of this all, if we can't find a way to teach all of ourselves and our populations the fundamental skills of critical thinking, of the scientific method, which was developed to overcome traditional human unconscious biases. If we can't find a way to do that, and to find a way to speak to each other in a more validating way, while trying to make progress together, then we're in trouble, or democracy is in trouble, or both. So that, that's an effort that we're really working on with this project, with trying to teach our machine learning, getting lots of people to help teach our machines to unbias, how to recognize bias. It's a big part of what we're doing, and certainly welcome help from everywhere to try. We have a site actually where you can go in and put in links to articles about coronavirus or whatever, and you can choose from pop-up menus that say this is the type of unconscious bias that this is appealing to, and it's why it's spreading. So we're working on projects like that to do translation beyond the Google Translate level, literal level right now, but at the conceptual level translation.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, that seems super cool, because I guess a lot of the stuff you're talking about the unconscious bias and stuff like that, it's very reminiscent of like climate change over the past 10 years or something, where there has been so much misinformation, or just like people refusing to believe scientific fact. And I think projects like this would do so well to actually like get that conversation in the right place, and not have us sitting there for like 10, 15 years still saying that there's no climate change. So yeah, no, that's super cool.
Absolutely. I am mindful, I think, of the time. The session should have almost, actually looks like somebody should be taking over, right?
Hello, I'm not facilitating, I'm the next speaker, I'm just saying hi.
You're the next speaker. Hi, Chris. Okay, so I don't want to chew into more of your time. Let me just thank you very much for the wonderful conversation and ideas. I've typed into the chat the site where you can play with the simulator yourselves and read up if you want, as well as the YouTube link for that thing. And please do find me. The best way to get through to me is actually that private Facebook link. And if you connect to me, especially if you type a little message and say, hey, I was on your Global Unconference, then I will happily connect with you, and we can keep up the conversation, what we're doing. Thank you so much, Shaw.
Thank you, Dakai. That was really, really interesting. And yeah, I'm going to jump off now, but yeah, thank you so much. It was a really interesting data and insights. Thank you.